Wisconsin-Eye's coverage of Campaign 2014 is being brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice supporting Wisconsin hospitals in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 campaigns continues. We're talking to Matt Adamcyzk of Wauwatosa. He's a Republican candidate for state treasurer. And just a note, Wisconsin Eye thanks the Wisconsin Hospital Association for helping make these interviews possible. Matt, welcome to Wisconsin Eye. Give us your background, qualifications.
Well, thanks for having me. Background, I'm from Wauwatosa, which is actually the home of our great governor, Governor Walker. A little bit about me, I help my family run a heating and cooling business. We've been around for about 30 years. I also own rental properties in the Milwaukee area, and I also manage a rental property company. And I would say, in addition to my private sector experience, I've spent about the last, 10 years working up at the Capitol for conservative legislators, including Senator Leah Vukmir from Wauwatosa and Tyler August from Lake Geneva. And over those 10 years, I've kind of developed a passion for wanting to eliminate government waste. And truthfully, I don't have to look much further for a prime example of it than the Office of State Treasurer. And that's the office I'm running for, and that's because the office costs us about $1 million every 2 years, costs the taxpayers about $1 million. And frankly, we don't get very much for it. It really has very few duties, and that's why I'm running to eliminate it. And I'm running to be the last state treasurer, hopefully.
Well, you've worked in the Capitol as an aide.
Correct.
So you well know that it takes votes by legislators to on the constitutional amendment that would eliminate state treasurer and secretary of state.
Correct.
Why would you not run for the ledge to have a chance to eliminate the job that you're now seeking? Is there a contradiction there?
I appreciate the question because it's a very easy one to answer. There are plenty of legislators that support it. We don't have a problem with legislators that want to support the elimination effort. We don't need any more. There's plenty that support it. When it passed in the state assembly, it passed with 67 votes to 32 no votes. That's a super majority. So if, let's say, under your scenario, I'd be 68. We don't need one more. Okay. What we need is a state treasurer who's going to back up the legislature. And frankly, that's what I plan to be. I'm going to basically work tirelessly to actually get the office eliminated. And I think it's absolutely important that the person that takes the office, because we're going to have an election in 2014, and a new person will be sworn in January, and the new governor sworn in, and hopefully Governor Walker. And I think it's important that the next state treasurer backs up the Republican-led effort to get rid of the office, and that's what I'm going to do.
Have you been a Capitol aide the last 3 or 4 years?
I've been up there, yes.
Okay. So then you realize that Kurt Schuler 4 years ago probably sat in that chair and said the same thing. I want to be state treasurer to eliminate. Why aren't we further along in getting rid of the state treasurer's job?
Well, we are further along. I give him credit for at least having the platform. I voted for him 4 years ago, but frankly, I'm disappointed in where he went with it, and that he initially, I think, had a support for it. Was initially put out a constitutional amendment working with Representative, I think Krug it was, but then this last legislative session, he basically backed off his platform. As far as I could tell, we had 2 hearings, one in the Assembly, one in the Senate. And he basically was nowhere to be seen. He didn't come in to testify. And then when we did pass it in the Assembly, and like I said, 67 votes in favor. We had 57 Republicans, were joined by 10 Democrats, including the Dem leader, Peter Barca. And after that vote, you would have thought he would have said, thank you for doing that. Come on, Senate, let's get this done. He didn't say a word. Okay. Instead, I think he let his number 2, his deputy, work against the bill. And in that regard, I'm disappointed because when you make a pledge to run for and do something in office, I think you should fulfill it. And I'm definitely going to back up my pledge to get rid of this office.
That was my next question. If you're elected state treasurer, you're not going to do a disappearing act on the issue?
Definitely not. I have the support of the Representative August and Representative Schrar, the 2 leads of the bill in the state assembly. They're both supporting me in the race. This is something that I'm passionate about getting rid of. I want this office eliminated because it costs us $1 million. And we, as the taxpayers, we're just not getting anything for that money. That money is just being wasted. And it's a very simple platform for me. I think it's common sense. It's not really even just a one-party issue. It's really bipartisan. I'll give you an example. Both Walker supports it, as does Tom Barrett, as does, like I said, Peter Barca, Speaker Voss. So you've got the leaders of various parties saying, let's get rid of this office. And they're joined by the State Journal and the Journal Sentinel. I mean, the editorial of the State Journal was, get rid of this do-nothing job. I mean, it seems pretty common sense to me that we should just get rid of this office.
What's left of the office? What's left of the duties and responsibilities?
Very, very little. Basically, the treasurer, he said this himself, he serves on one board, the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, and he said that it basically requires him to make 2 15-minute calls a month, conference calls. So he doesn't even have to be in Madison to do it. And for that, he makes, for those 2 15-minute phone calls of 30 minutes of work a month, he makes nearly $70,000 plus benefits. And that's one guy. And then the treasurer has 3 staff. So the office really is just 4 people total.
4 people, 4 FTEs.
4 full-time, including the treasurer.
Including the treasurer.
So it's really 3 staff, a deputy, a communications director, and a secretary. And, you know, for 4 people to cost that kind of money, I think is just silliness. And they don't really have much to do. So I say, let's just get rid of the office altogether.
Is the treasurer still in charge of the unclaimed property program?
Nope, that was stripped. That was moved on over to the Department of Revenue in the last budget, and it was done for efficiency purposes. So the treasurer doesn't even have that. I mean, for example, when the current treasurer won 4 years ago, he ran on a platform of eliminating it, and the few programs the office did have back then are now gone. I mean, Adamcyzk got moved, and unclaimed property. Those are the 2 big programs they had. They've been completely removed. Department of Revenue fully is the custodian of the unclaimed property program. And I think the legislature wisely moved it over there because for efficiency purposes. And I'll just give you one quick example. There was a bill that was just passed this last legislative session. It was Assembly Bill 801. It was signed into law by the governor a few months ago. It passed both houses unanimously. So it was a voice vote in both houses.
Right.
And what it did is it allowed the money that people might have in unclaimed property, which are like abandoned bank accounts and stuff like that, it allows it to be linked up via Social Security number with your tax returns. And again, a DOR can do that. So let's use this as an example. Let's say, Steve, you've got $75 in an unclaimed property from a bank account that you didn't know about from 10 years ago.
I forgot to close, yes.
Okay, so you got $75 over there. Right now, you'd have to fill forms out, and you might very well just not even do it, let alone know about it. This way, if you file your taxes like everybody else does, every April, if they can link up your Social Security number, and they can do that for quite a few of them, they'll just immediately send your money back. So let's say you were going to get a $1,000 refund, you'd get $1,075 sent to you automatically. And that can only be done at the Department of Revenue because they have, the 3 million tax ID numbers for the Social Security numbers. And I, for one, don't want another agency like the Treasurer's Office having 3 million people's tax, identification numbers. There's no reason for that. And these efficiencies can only be done over at the Department of Revenue.
So there's only 4 employees, including the treasurer,
Yep.
right now.
Yep.
So if you're elected on the first day, why don't you lay off 2 of your FTEs and just keep you and the part-time receptionist?
I'm going to do better than that.
Because the Constitution would say you'd still be, as a constitutional officer, you'd still be serving a 4-year term. So what are you going to do on day 1 if you're elected?
Day 1, I can save the budget 80%. I appreciate the question. Actually, on my website, I'm not planning to have any staff. I would have the opportunity to hire up to 3 people.
Who's going to answer the phone?
I can do it myself. The Treasurer's Office, like I said, has 3 people that work for it: a deputy, a communications director, and a secretary. The fact that they have a deputy and a communications director for an office that has 3 people is, I think, kind of silly. I mean, agencies like DHS might have 1,000 employees, and they have a deputy, they have a communications director.
Yep.
There's no reason for an agency, which the Office of State Treasurer would have 3 of the 3 employees, a deputy and a communications director. So I tell people I can save the budget day 1 80% because of all the staff salary and benefits that go to it. I mean, I'll give you an example. The deputy treasurer's salary is almost $80,000. You add benefits, FICA, pension, you're talking a $100,000 employee. So on a yearly budget of about $500,000, that's 20% of the budget for one person. And that just doesn't make sense to me. So
when I talked to the executive secretary of the Bureau of Public Lands, she says that not having a treasurer would hurt her agency's ability to make these decisions. So what's your plan to help the Bureau of Public Lands?
Okay, well, the one duty the treasurer has is to serve on the one board, and that's the 2 conference calls I talked about earlier. He makes the 2 15-minute conference calls. The BCPL has got 3 people on it: the treasurer, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General.
Right.
And typically they don't meet; they specifically call in, for a conference call. In the Assembly amendment that's been proposed, the last legislative session was AGR 48. It's very simple. It strikes out the name State Treasurer and subs in the name Lieutenant Governor. So you're taking one constitutional officer and trading in for another person. They're both partisan offices, and frankly, I think Rebecca Clayfish could easily handle the job. I mean, it's just one more thing that would be added to her plate, but it would also eliminate this whole office, which would save us the $1 million.
As I remember the debate in the Capitol, the first idea was let's get rid of Secretary of State and State Treasurer, and then it somehow got separated, right? What was the backstory on that?
Well, I think at one point it was decided that it would be easier to do one at a time, and so do the State Treasurer first, and that's what they were doing, and then do the Secretary of State next. And so I believe that's the plan going forward. The last I talked to the lead, which was Representative Schra, we're going to do the same thing. Try to get rid of the State Treasurer first, okay, and then maybe the next session work on the next office. And I think it just makes more sense because then on the ballot, if they're a ballot before the people, there'd just be one question before them. Do you support the elimination of the office of State Treasurer?
So on the day after you took this office, there would be how many employees?
Just me.
Just you?
Yep, and I also have a platform to take a reduced salary.
Are you allowed to do that?
Technically, elected officials cannot take a reduced salary. I'd have to give it back to the state, and that's what I'm planning to do.
You do all of it?
Not all of it. 25. Right now, the salary for the state treasurer is $68,556.
Okay.
The legislators make just under $50,000.
Right.
My platform is, I know what the state legislators do with the conference committees and all the hearings they have. I certainly don't think it makes any more sense for a state treasurer who has very little duty to make more pay than they make than a state senator or a state representative. So my platform is I'm going to make their salary, which is about a 25% reduction. And I'll just basically have to write a check back to the state, and that's part of my platform. It's right on my website.
Okay. What happens to you then if you're successful? I mean, it looks good on your resume, state treasurer, but you're eliminating your own job. What do you do next?
All that ever happens out of my life is the fact that we're able to eliminate this one position, save that, and I think it's just a fight worth fighting for because the office literally has no real duties. And it just seems odd to me to keep an office that doesn't do anything. And I look at it and I say, the office right now, what they do in the office is just absolutely wasteful. They have, for example, the total of 4 employees. That's it.
Yes.
They have 5 cell phones. On one of the open records I attained from last December, they had 5 cell phones. Okay. And I was told by one of the people in the office it's a floater phone. I mean, and to spend $380 a month for 5 cell phones plus 2 hotspots, I mean that's $4,000 or $5,000 a year down the drain. I mean, when you're a state employee that sits at a desk and you have a landline in front of you and a computer in front of you with the internet, why would you need a cell phone? The simple answer is you don't need one. But this is just the perks that they give themselves, and I'm not going to have a state cell phone, and I don't plan to travel. That's one of the areas that I've been focusing on with the state treasurer's office. They go on a lot of trips, okay? I'll give you an example. The state treasurer and the deputy treasurer have flown out to D.C. to attend a conference, the National Association of State Treasurers. Right. Well, they fly out there and they stay at a 5-star hotel, the Mandarin Oriental. I've been to D.C. a few times, all on my own pay. Never once would stay at a hotel like that. I can't afford it. What they pay when they go out there, $350. That's what the taxpayers pick up.
$350 a night?
$350 a night. That's quite a bit of money for the taxpayers to pay so that they can go to a conference that, frankly, they have really no reason being there. Because in some states, there's treasurers have duties. Our state just is a state that does not have any duties, and that's for that reason. Why would we go to those conferences? Yeah. I think it's basically to go there and just basically have a trip or a taxpayer-funded junket on the taxpayer dime. And I'm not going to do that, and I've said that multiple times.
A little bit ago, your opponent in the primary, Mr. Melchert, sat there and said, let's continue the office. Is that the biggest disagreement between you and him?
And I don't know Randy too well. I've met him a few times. He seems like a good man. I think if we were running for a similar office like the state assembly, let's say, I would say we'd be locked up on probably almost every issue. I think he's a good man. I think he's probably a good conservative. But if I look at this office, what we're running for, the state treasurer's position, I don't think there could be a bigger difference between us. I mean, the contrast couldn't be bigger. I want to eliminate the office. He wants to keep the office. Who wants to eliminate it? It's, on down. Governor Walker, 95% of the state assembly voted to eliminate it. All the Republicans did. There was, like I said, 57 of them did. And, you've got even bipartisan support from Tom Barrett, Peter Barca, and then you've got the State Journal and the Journal Sentinel. So either they're all wrong and my opponent's, right, or it's the opposite. And I believe I stand with Governor Walker. I stand with the Republicans in the legislature, and I say that this office isn't needed. Whether it's my opponent in the primary or my opponents in the general, they talk about what this office could do. Okay, well, that's not the lay of the land. The legislature does not want this office doing anything. They are moving full speed ahead next session to get rid of it. And the reason I think it's absolutely important for people to vote for me on August 12th is because I am going to back up the legislature. I think in some ways it's like an early version of the referendum on, do you want to keep this office? So my primary opponent, Randy, wants to keep the office. I want to eliminate it. And I think hopefully I'll win on August 12th, and that'll be further indication that the Republicans at least want to get rid of this office.
It's a fascinating debate. Matt Adamcyzk of Wauwatosa is the Republican candidate for the state treasurer. Matt, thanks for coming into Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.